Right, okay, let's get on with it. So, as usual, I'm going to slide the chat box over to the left. For anybody who's here for the first time or watching this for the first time, I'll slide the chat box out of the screen while we're doing the presentation. I'll go through the slides, explain the information I want to get across to you, and then we'll come back to any questions at the end. But anything you think of on the way, just type the question in the chat box and type it there, and I'll come back to it later on. Okay, here we go. Let's just come back to this. Play slideshow. Okay, so past life regression. I'm not going to go through the whole topic of past life regression because it's quite a big topic to discuss, really. I'm just going to go through a few little ideas and basically the principles of carrying out one, of what you need to look out for and how to do it, basically. And this whole topic, we could easily grab a bottle of wine and sit up all night talking about it. And I've had enough experiences of myself to, just have various opinions on it. But for now, let's just go through the practicalities of it. Okay, so the whole thing about past lives and past life regression, is it real? Are they imaginary? This is what people often talk about. So, I've had past life regressions done on me, which have been quite fascinating, and I've carried out many that have been, fascinating, amazing, awesome experiences in a way. But are the results genuine or not? So I just want to go through some of the possibilities first of all, because I like to be open-minded about it. I don't like to impose my opinions on anybody. So if anybody asks me, excuse me, what I normally say is this. Okay, that for me, the possible explanations for what happens are, it could be complete imagination. It could be just someone, off on a little rant, they're off on their own little journey, and it's pure imagination, and that's entirely possible. The next one could be, it's kind of imagination, but it's like a symbolic representation of someone's inner thoughts and their issues. So the areas in life that someone wants to deal with or sort out, as if their mind will create another lifetime, another set of experiences to show them, so you can almost observe what's going on and see it from a distance. Kind of observe yourself from someone else's point of view in a way. So that's another possible explanation that makes a lot of sense to me. Another one that people quite often come up with is called cryptomnesia, which simply means that someone has had some information before, but they've forgotten they've had it before. They've kind of stored it away in the crypt of their mind and forgotten about it with amnesia. And then when it comes back in some way, they treat it as if it's from something else. The typical, usual way this gets related to past lives is that somebody's watched a film or something when they were younger or read a book. They've internalized that story in some way. And then when they have a past life regression, they then relive that film or relive the movie or the play or the book as if it's a past life regression, as if they're in it. They've kind of forgotten that the story came from somewhere else. So that's kind of what cryptomnesia is, or it could just be information that someone's told them. They've heard something, overheard a story. So that's a common way that past life regressions are explained away. Another possible explanation is they're totally, completely genuine. All right. Now, from my experience, any and all of those could be true. Okay, I don't know that they're genuine. I don't know they're not genuine. It's impossible to know these things, really. Some people have strong opinions and state their opinion as if it's fact, but really it's impossible to know from our current perspective. So, but your belief system will allow you to either accept or reject these ideas. But sometimes I've done past life regressions with people, and it's like obvious. Well, nothing. This seems like they're just making something up. It just seems like vague imagination here. Other times, then it's actually a really quite meaningful symbolic representation of their inner thoughts and issues. You can see what's going on in their life now played out in another drama in some way. The cryptomnesia I've not come across myself too much, but there's plenty of documented cases of that. And the genuine ones, sometimes I've seen past life regressions where they're just downright profound things to watch people go through and go through yourself. And if they are if there is such a thing as a genuine past life regression, then I think I've seen a few and felt a few. But can I guarantee that? I don't know. I'm not sure. So just be aware of those possible explanations first. Okay, so for now, let's just say if it is genuine, if they are genuine, and you can really have a past life regression, then where does the information come from? So the most common viewpoint seems to suggest that the past life information has been there all along, if only we decided to take a look. Right? This isn't particularly my point of view. This is a very common way of thinking about past lives and past life regression. Okay, and the general feeling is that somehow that information is stored in either like a deeper part of our unconscious mind. Okay, so we have our normal conscious and subconscious bit, and then underneath that there's like a deeper level, and that our other life information is stored in that place. That's a common way of thinking about it all, right? And in everyday life, we only remember this life memories. When we can do a hypnotic recall, we can tap into other life memories as well. Another belief system says it's all the information is stored in like the equivalent of a cosmic library that we can access. Some people call it like the Akashic records, is a phrase you may come across. People believe you can visit the Akashic records, which is like a record of all people, all time, all experiences, and visit that. And some people say that when people have a past life regression or a past life experience, what's happening is they're visiting this cosmic library and finding the information from there. Is it true? Is it not true? I have no idea. It's a nice idea. It could be that, let me just go back a slide, that same belief system, that deeper level of our subconscious unconscious is actually is that library. That's another way of thinking about it, that they're one and the same thing. All right? It's entirely possible. I don't essentially believe that myself, but it's possible and could be that way. Right? Another thing people say is that information is stored in our body, in our genes, or our energy body, as if it's kind of carried through in some kind of physicality or energy in some way. That the information is transmitted that way. So there's a few different opinions on this, and I'm sure there's many, many more, but these are some of the more common ones. Okay, I tend not to get drawn into too many arguments about this because it tends to come down to personal opinion and personal belief system, really. So I try not to get too bogged down with the discussion of it. If somebody asks me, I give kind of vague answers, but I leave it open to each person to decide for themselves. So whatever the belief, whatever people believe about where the information comes from or what it really is, then the typical way of considering past lives is that something happened in the past that is stored somewhere but available to us now. And the purpose of a past life regression is to somehow access that information. Right? That's the standard way of thinking about it. Okay. Again, I'm not going to go into this too much detail now, but that's based on the idea that time is linear. We just drop this idea in that time is linear, that time goes from past to present to future. And that there can be a past life, a present life, and a future life. And we can go back in time to visit a past life or back into memories. And that one life leads on to the next one. That is the common theory that most people adhere to. However, there's another very different way of thinking about things. I'll cover that another time. There's a bit of a pun there. But briefly, just to drop the idea there, if outside of normal reality there is no such thing as time, which is what pretty much all the spiritual teachings and learnings and even science suggest, that if there's no such thing as time, then all lives must be existing simultaneously. Okay, all lives must be existing at once. You cannot have a past life if outside of each life there's no such thing as time, because instead of the lives being one after the other, they'd all line up together. Right, and I've got some notes on that, and I will go through this idea in more detail another time, another webinar. But just for now, just be aware that when you're talking about a past life regression, actually, you have to believe in linear time for that to be true. And if you think about the idea of karma, people say, well, what you do in one life builds up, and then you get the benefit, the payoff, or the punishment in the next life. Again, that doesn't make sense if you step outside linear time, because the consequence and the action itself are occurring simultaneously. Cause and effect do not make sense outside of normal time, because the cause and the effect are both happening at the same time. Right? My personal understanding is they can still interact, but it's a very, very different way. Right? Again, that's one for grab a bottle of wine, stay up all night talking about it. But for now, I just want to drop that idea there, all right? Because I don't like the idea of people feeling powerless in the present because of something happened in the past. All right? Even normal regression, I still only use that as a tool. Normal analytical regression is just a means, a tool of helping people change thoughts, feelings, memories. Right? Everything is still really in the present moment is where the most powerful thing is, but we can use regression, you can use memories to help people change things. Same with past lives. Okay, I don't believe people need to give their power away to a past life, but you can use it to help people make changes in the present. Okay, to me that's quite important, because otherwise we not only have we got all our this life stuff to sort out, we've also got to trawl through endless other lifetimes trying to solve problems. You know, it just goes on and on and on for infinity. Okay, good. So let's leave all theories behind for now, and let's just say someone says, I love a past life regression. Okay, sometimes these things happen spontaneously, but sometimes people say, can you do a past life regression on me? Right? And they can be quite interesting experiences. So they typically follow a certain number of stages, very similar to a normal session, but slightly amended for the past life topic. So first of all, there's always some kind of introductory chat. Then there's the hypnotic induction and the deepening. I'm going to go through these in more detail in just a moment, but quick overview first of all. Induction and the deepening. Then there's the transition to the past life. Then there is some kind of questioning and the recall of the experience within that. Then, of course, there's some kind of return to normal awareness. Then there's a little discussion afterwards. Okay, so pretty similar to a normal regression, really, but some of the bits in the middle are slightly different, obviously, for past lives. So let's just go through that for a moment. The introductory chat, then, this is a relaxed, informal chat to ascertain some of the client's ideas and beliefs on the subject of past lives. Okay, I want to find out what this person's belief system is. Some people are very, very super spiritual about the whole thing and have a certain set of beliefs about how it should be, and I like to make sure I operate within that belief system for them. Other people have no idea. They just, it's just interests them. They want to see what happens, So when you have the initial chat, just listen exactly the same way you would with any first-time meeting with a client. Pay attention to the words they use, the phrases they use, look for the belief systems they're giving you. And just use the same clean language type questions, right? So whatever they're saying, just be very, very clean language questioning with them. And depending on how much time you've got and what they say, that this chat could be 10, 15 minutes, could be 20, 30 minutes if there's an issue they're trying to sort out, right? So someone who's just wants a past life regression for pure interest is very different than someone who's coming with an emotional problem and they think the answer lies in the past life. Okay, so two examples that come to mind are, one was a guy who came to see me. He said, my wife and children are away for a week and I've got a week in London to myself and I'm doing all the things I never get a chance to do. He said, I love a past life regression. He was a city worker and he had an amazing past life regression. It's fantastic. That was, different accent, different voice, the whole thing. It's brilliant. Even came up with some information that I didn't know, he didn't know. And researched that afterwards, and it was quite enlightening to both of us. He was a blacksmith in his previous life, and he's describing all these details about this little particular part of the sword that he was very skilled at. And I'd never heard of the phrase, and he didn't know what it was at the time, but we looked it up, and he was the expert in making these little things there. But that was a great one. So it's just a fascinating experience for both of us, really. Whereas another example that comes to mind is someone has said, "Oh, I'm having relationship troubles." And when we first met, my husband said, "Oh, we know each other from a past life." And so she's thinking, well, if we're supposed to be together, I can't split if we're supposed to be together. So can I find out if we really were from a past life and all that kind of thing? So there's not much more, kind of more pressure on those in a way. Something I did ask her was, did he tell you that before you got together or afterwards? Was it just a chat up line? Because that can be a cheeky one. So the introductory chat, I'm trying to find out what the person wants, what's their purpose, because then that can guide how you do the actual regression itself. Right? So get a feel for what the person's actually looking for. And again, let's say someone has an issue they want to sort out. Just because the client believes or has been told it's a past life doesn't mean it necessarily is. Okay, so again, look out for the usual patterns of speech that give away the person's beliefs, but also remain open-minded. All right, so when I say look out for those kind of things, look out for, filter the words out, take out all the extra words and look for the key words, the buzzwords, the emotive words, and they'll give you an idea as to what's going on in that person's mind. But again, do remain open-minded. Okay. So once you've got past that, we want to start the process off. Then, this can be any induction method you feel comfortable with. But I would normally say just take your time and get a really, really nice kind of quite a deep level of relaxation, deep level of hypnosis, really. Sometimes with normal regression, you don't need too much, but with the past life ones, because it just requires that extra little bit of letting go, extra little bit of suspending the critical faculty. I normally just take it just a little bit longer and make sure that person really is just that little bit deeper. So just take your time with those ones. And then once we've got that person in a good state, then you need to begin the transition to the past life recall. All right, so it's the same as you would for any kind of type of hypnotic regression, only the wording suggests or allows for the recall of past life information. Okay. It's just come to mind that, some people do future life. You can go to future lives and stuff. I've never done that. It's just not within my beliefs, not my ethics or whatever, but I just think we don't need to go looking at the future. Just create it for yourself and get on with it and then see what happens. So I tend not to do those kind of future things. So we've got a nice deep state of hypnosis, but before we start doing the regression itself, I normally do a little kind of preparation statement. Okay, a few words or phrases just to help the person prepare. So it's usually something like this. In a few moments, you'll be visiting one of your previous lives or past lives. You'll be safe and protected at all times, and your mind will only take you to a time and place that is relevant and meaningful to your life now. You can stay relaxed and calm throughout the entire experience. Okay. The first two of those are true. The third one, sometimes they may not stay calm and relaxed. Sometimes they can be extremely lively, these little sessions. All right. So that's a reassurance, but sometimes that may be a little fib if the whole thing kicks off in some way. But I like to be reassuring at the beginning anyway. Okay, so we're just saying you're safe and protected at all times, and your mind will take you to something relevant and meaningful. I think that's the most important bit. Okay, so do that first of all, just to put people at ease, and then how we actually do the regression bit. Well, there's so many ways we can do this. So these are just a few examples that I've used over the years, and these aren't word for word scripts, but if you can get the idea, and then you can create your own script. All right, because as you've heard me bang on so many times, I don't particularly believe in the idea of giving you word-for-word scripts. I think take a principle, take an idea, and adapt it to your own vocabulary, your own way of thinking. But if you can get an idea, then you can imagine and make stuff up on the spot. Right? So the stately home is one I use for quite a while. So you create a guided visualization of walking through a stately home. So you describe in detail walking down a corridor that has many doors. So linking to the previous statement, you say, okay, you're going to visit a past life, you're safe and relaxed, protected, meaningful, everything's okay, you can stay calm and relaxed. And now I'd just like you to imagine that you're walking into a beautiful stately home. As you walk down the corridor, there's doors and doors on either side, and maybe there's a thick plush carpet. And you feel calm and you feel safe and you feel relaxed, all this kind of stuff, okay? So you ask the client to, walk down this corridor, and there's various doors there. And eventually you ask them to just choose a door, or they'll be drawn towards a certain door. And that when they step through the door, they'll be in a different place and a different time. And when they do, you ask them to look around and get a feel for where they are. And I'll come to that in just a moment. All right. So if you just think of that idea, all you got to do is just close your eyes and just paint the picture, get an idea yourself, and just describe that. And imagine you're walking down that corridor yourself. Describe it to them using generic terms, and that client will tend to go with that quite well. If they're very visual, that's okay. If they're very kinesthetic, if their sensory modality, excuse me, is very kinesthetic, you might want to go through different feelings. You get the feeling of the place. You're feeling in a lovely home, beautiful home, just feel the atmosphere, feel the history, and get a sense of just walking down the corridor, a sense of that carpet. Right? If you put things in kinesthetic terms to someone who's kinesthetic, they'll relate to that far better, and then they will start to visualize. If you do visualize first, they probably just won't get it. It's really important to know that. Okay, another one is like multiple paths. All right, so you can create a guided visualization of walking through a beautiful garden with many paths. Okay, and at some point you say there's different paths. Each path leads to a different lifetime. As the client chooses that particular path, it's leading them to experience a previous life. And the path leads into a calming and pleasant mist. And as they emerge from the mist on the other side, they'll be in one of their previous lives. Okay. So again, all you got to do is remember the idea of this. All right, garden, lots of paths, bit of mist, come on the other side of it. And then you can do one of these anywhere you are. Any spontaneously you can do one. If a client books in for something, and when you're not prepared for it, and they say, actually, I want a past life regression, you can just go for it on the spot. You haven't got to rustle around 10 sheets of paper to get an induction and your past life regression script. You can just go for it. Okay. So multiple paths, and there's many variations of that. Floating out the body. When I had my very, very first hypnosis experience, back in 1991, was it? Yeah, 1991. With the little wizardy chap. Then he did a past life regression on me in this little bedroom on the top of a house in North London. And God, I was trusting at the time. Climbed up the stairs into this kind of third floor, fourth floor, led on a little bed in a little room with this strange guy. And he had me kind of imagining floating out my body. So floating out the body, going back into it, floating out the body, back into it, and finally floating out the body, up, out of the room, above the buildings, above the city. I was in London at the time, above London, above the country, above the UK, above the earth, just way, way, way up and up and up and up. So I could just see the earth below. Then you come back down again, and you come down, 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 down. But when you come down, you're in a different time and a different place. And that's what he did with me. And I had quite a vivid past life regression experience in that moment. Is it true? Is it real? Is it genuine? Don't know. Was it symbolic? Don't know. But it was very meaningful to me at the time, and it was quite a fascinating experience. And before we can do the back room of the library, if you from the diploma notes there, the library model, sometimes I'll do that one. Okay, so if I've already know the client, or maybe it's just a nice way of explaining it, I say there's a library in our mind where we store all the information from this life. But also at the back room, there's a little dusty door that leads into the archive room, and beyond there, we can access any of our previous lives. And just walk through the door, and sometimes you'll find that their mind is ahead of you, okay, and they're already starting to think stuff. Sometimes I just say, just go through the door there, and your mind will take you to just the right place to have just the right experience for you. Leading off to memories of other lives. So again, you just imagine that in your mind and describe it however it seems appropriate to you. Right? Another one, I tend to use this one if someone's got an emotional issue, but we're not sure, is it this life? Is it really another life? Then I use just a straightforward regression. Okay, so we've been talking about past lives, but I may say to them, look, I don't know if it's true or not that it's in a past life. It could be this life, but let's just see, shall we? See what happens. So I do a very gentle kind of sliding back in time regression type thing, the same as I would for a normal regression. Only we've got this past life idea at the back of our minds because we've been talking about it in the initial chat. All right. So in this one, you see, look, we're using the feeling to take the person back in time, but without necessarily saying past lives. We're just saying back to any place, any time, wherever your mind seems to take you back to. Okay, back in time as if there's no such thing as time. And wherever that may be, my voice going with you. So just very typical regression type phrases there. You can use that paragraph word for word, and that would do the job. So I tend to do that where people have emotional stuff they're looking to solve. because it leaves it much more open-ended. And sometimes what has happened when I've done that is people have asked for a past life regression, but they've got an emotional thing. So we go through, so we use the emotional thing, and we go through some this life memories, maybe some childhood stuff, and then it may dip into other life things, and I'll have a past life regression experience as well, and then it may jump back to this life. So I've had quite a few people there where they jumped around all over the place, really, and the whole thing kind of makes sense in the end. It always loops up, always completes in some way, so we get the full story. So again, it's nice to be open sometimes. And then number 6 here is anything you can imagine, really. Sometimes the client will give you ideas in the initial discussion. You can use their metaphors as the transition process. Right? The transition process, I mean, from getting to relaxed and nice relaxed state of hypnosis to how do you trigger the recall. Or sometimes you can just use your own imagination, something that may just come to mind. You may have seen something on TV or heard something on radio, read something in a book, and you think, oh, that's a nice idea. Just anything at all that comes to mind, you could go with it. But just be aware of people's modality. All right? So a visual person will be able to visualize very easily. A kinesthetic person, you'll have to go through feelings and senses first of all, and then the visualization will come. All right? So just to be aware of that. But the general principle is of helping someone to make a transition from the here and now to a different here and now. Okay. So let's say we've done that, we've done the visualization, we've guided them somewhere, and we got to a point where we're about to ask them to say something. Okay. So this is the questioning and the recall. So with normal regressions, we leave it quite open, but with the past life regression, you can sometimes be much more directive than with standard regression techniques, depending on what the client is seeking and how the regression unfolds. Okay. However, do use the same standard clean language practices, even when they're in the regression. So sometimes the regression will flow smoothly with very little intervention from yourself. Other times you may have to prompt with questions and directions. So I usually begin by asking the client to notice the ground and their feet, which is often surprising. Okay. I remember the very first time I ever did a past life regression. It was on a friend of mine. He was the drummer in the band I was in at the time, and he was led on a bed. We were all living. The whole band was living above a kebab shop in North London. It was proper kind of Spinal Tap business, really, But he was led on this little bed, and I said, "Okay, let's look down at your feet." And he spoke in this very soft voice, and he said, "Oh, I've got these big, hairy feet," and I nearly cracked up laughing, again, but I couldn't because he was quite serious there. I just wasn't expecting him to say that. But then we had quite an amazing experience with him there. But he was describing, he looked down at the feet, and the feet were different, and the ground was different. And you find that the terrain will give some indication of where the person is in their mind in that experience. So I normally start off with the feet and the ground, and just kind of take it from there, really. You don't have to do that. I just find that works quite well. So people will say, oh, it's sand, or it's stone, or it feels like wood, or I've got boots on, or shoes, or I'm barefoot, or something like that. And that's a typical thing that happens. But let's just go through some of the common questions you might want to ask. Okay, and these are usually I only usually ask these if someone is intending to do a past life regression. Right? If it happens spontaneously, I'll just use pure clean language questions and let the whole process go very openly. But if someone says, yeah, I want a past life regression because I want to see what I can find out, then I'll use these questions. So as I said just now, notice your feet. Are you wearing anything on your feet? Do you notice anything about your clothing? Do you know your name? Do you know your age? Are you male, female? I don't always ask these questions in this order, by the way. These are just things in my mind that I'm looking to try and get from someone. Usually I find it's much better to let them just talk and really sink into the experience first of all before you try and get too much information. Right? Let them get a feel for where they are, what's going on around them, different surroundings, and get more immersed in it before you try and gather information. I find that tends to work much better. But these are kind of typical surface level information to get. Then you want to try and gather things about where they are. Do you know where you are in this place? Are you indoors, outdoors, that kind of stuff? What's the area like? Is it sand? I wouldn't say is it sandy, but trying to get them to say, look, is it on sand? Is it beach? Is it stone? Is it countryside? Are you in a town, a city? Whatever it may be. And a very good regression, all this information just comes out anyway. But one where it's a little bit in between, you may have to extract it with quite a lot of questions. Are there any other people around? Do you know your occupation? Do you know what year this is? Do you know what time period it is? These kind of things are interesting to see if we can find out. What I usually say is just allow your mind to go to poignant moments, major life events that cause turning points in this lifetime. And then let the person's mind just go to these and see where they go to. Rather than guiding it at certain ages, certain times, just let's say poignant moments, meaningful moments. And then it's much more open, it's much more directed from within the client. Okay. Notice any meaningful relationships. Do you recognize any from your current lifetime? These kind of things. The people often say, "Oh yeah, I reckon there's someone I recognize, but it's them, but it's not them. It feels like them, but it isn't them." So they feel like the energy of them, but the face is different, or the body's different. If you've heard that in a dream, where you think, well, it was so and so, but it wasn't so and so. It seemed like it was them, but the face was different, the body was different. To me, it's entirely possible that if we do have other lives, other existences, then dreams could access them just as easy as these do. So could those dreams where it's them but it isn't them, could that be a past life, another life? Who knows, Anything's kind of possible in a way. So just going to be aware of these feeling senses of people who seem familiar in some way. Again, I might say allow your mind to address any unresolved issues, upsets, any feelings and emotions that may have carried over from one life to the next and be affecting it in some way. So just kind of feeling around for those. Again, if you just ask the person to feel around for different feelings and emotions, then the mind will often take them somewhere, some time, some place within that experience. And sometimes it might jump off somewhere else. Okay, you don't always get one lifetime per regression. Sometimes you can have a few, which can be confusing at times, but especially if the client hasn't quite told you they've jumped lifetime experiences, that can be a little bit of a model at times. But usually when that happens, there's a reason for it and there's a connection. But yeah, so don't be afraid of asking the person to look at feelings and emotions and see where it takes them to. I nearly always say go to the end of the lifetime, okay, and become aware of any meaningful final moments. How a person ends that lifetime is often quite meaningful in some way, that lifetime experience. So quite often I say just become aware of anything you can learn or bring with you that may be useful nowadays. Any insight, any message you could give yourself from that life to this life. Little things like that. And once we've gone through that, then also just allow your mind to reveal anything else that is important for you to understand right now. And sometimes you just get a little tiny bit of extra insight there as well. That's more like the instruction to yourself to learn something from it, from that lifetime. Some people worry about going to the end of a lifetime. I've been through quite a few of those myself, and I've seen quite a few. And when I've been through them myself, they've always been quite fascinating, actually. I've seen myself on a funeral pyre, seen myself get speared with a sword, or I don't know what you call it, run through with a sword. Sorry, not speared with a sword. A couple. Those are the two main ones that come to mind, and there's experience attached to it, but from my own personal experience, it's been meaningful. It's meant something. I thought, oh my goodness, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I'm not saying that I've always got an ache in that part of my body. That's where the sword went through. It's more like the emotional impact of what was I thinking, feeling at the time. What didn't I finish? What didn't I do? What challenges were left undone at that moment? How does that make a difference to me now? And those things I've always found useful. Whether the experience was a real past life or was it just a symbolic thing, who knows, okay? But quite often when you go to the end of a life, you'll get a good positive result from that as well. So don't be afraid to do that. Okay, and then when you've gone through that for a while, when the regression has run its course, or you need to wind up the session because of time constraints, just instruct the client that it's now time to return to the normal everyday awareness. Same as you do in a normal regression. Tell them they'll remember and bring back with them everything that's useful for them to remember. As simple as that, really. And again, it depends on the time you've got. If you've got an hour, then it's quite a rush trying to do all this in an hour. If you've got longer, then you can let the whole thing keep going. And sometimes, as I said, people will jump from one lifetime to the next. Sometimes very gently, sometimes quite dramatically, and it can be quite a good experience. The guy I told you about earlier, the guy from the city who came, who had like a mini bucket list in a way. And the first one, he had a very, very broad accent, almost like a West Country type accent, and he was a blacksmith, and he spoke with a real drawl, and he was talking about his wife and her big nose and his son and all this kind of stuff, and it was so vivid, and it was extremely realistic. And then when he jumped to another life, it was completely different. This time he was a member of the King's Army, and he spoke in a very well-spoken voice. So it went from like a worker with a drawl and accent to a very, very kind of Queen's English type voice. Completely different scenario, and it just jumped from one to the next within a few moments. So that's quite fascinating. So if you do have time and you can let it run, that's fantastic. But sometimes you've got to try and wrap it up within the time frame as well. So at some point, you need to tell them to begin to let go, begin to release that experience, bringing back with them anything that's useful, anything that's meaningful, back to this place, back to this time, back to their current lifetime, and they will remember everything. And then as they come round, then just have a little chat. I tend not to analyze too much, but it's nice to let them talk through it for a moment, right? So often they will have forgotten some points in the same way we do when waking from a dream. And when you remind them, they will recall more information, right? But again, the usual thing I'll ask for is just notice any feelings, any emotions they went through. And just ask if there's, does any of that relate to their current life experience? Does any of it make sense? Does it seem meaningful? Does it seem relevant? The issues in that life, do they seem relevant in this life? Those kind of things. And just see what happens. I won't put ideas in their mind. I just ask them questions, right? Just to set their mind kind of looking at the whole thing and seeing what it can come up with. I try to get them to give me a brief summary without overanalyzing, as I said, but I do suggest they go in and write it down, the whole experience, because more information will usually come out that way. And I find this as a really, really useful exercise to do when you've had a past life regression experience. Whether it's genuine, whether it's just completely made up, either way, if you do this writing down exercise, you will turn the whole thing into a very useful exercise for yourself, a very useful experience. Okay. So you write it down as if you're going through it again, as if you're trying to convey the whole feeling, the whole atmosphere to someone else. You're trying to set the scene in some way. I tend to write these things, or encourage people to write them in the first person, describing it, where you are, what's happening, what's going on there. Just writing it, and as you do that, you'll find your mind will kind of download more information, or the client's mind will download more information and fill in some of the details. And just do that as one big flow, first of all, if you can, without trying to analyze anything. And then what I suggest is, when you've done that, go back and take a look at, once again, any emotive words and phrases. If you could take the story out of the writing and just look at the emotive phrases, that will usually be very, very revealing and highlight the various issues at play. And when you kind of underline those, then they give you an indicator of different areas of life that maybe you could take a look at in the present. And sometimes they just go anyway, sometimes they just change. That regression experience I had where I got run through with a sword, then pretty much after that, a lot of things changed for me, because at that moment it was about being letting go of some egotistical stuff and letting go of just battles for the sake of it. I was fighting for the sake of fighting in that particular lifetime experience there. I was causing others to get into trouble through my own arrogance in a way, within that lifetime there. And it was all about just letting go, just dropping it all. And I remember so vividly when I was having that experience after being, run through the sword and just thinking, oh my God, I've done it again. I didn't learn. And when I was going through it, in the present moment, having that experience, I felt those feelings in my body, not the sword, but I felt the regret, the remorse. I think, oh, I've forgotten again. I messed up again. I let my ego get carried away with me and become too arrogant, too cocky, too whatever. And I felt all the remorse of that. And that moment, something in me changed instantly the next day. And a whole lot of old behaviors just fell away, or I chose to let them fall away. And a lot of my attitude to life changed. And some of the things I was wearing changed. I changed my clothes. It just thought, oh God, I've got to let go of that whole pretense I was going through. And it all just fell away in that moment. So, these things can be pretty poignant, really. Good. Okay. So what can you expect to happen when you take people through these things? Well, as with any hypnotic experience, the results will vary from person to person. And typically, your regressions will fall into one of the following categories. Okay, so sorry, but sometimes absolutely nothing happens. Okay, it's just the way it is sometimes, right? Nothing happens. Those can be a little frustrating. But usually, if someone comes with too high expectations and they want too much, then sometimes they're so busy looking for something that they don't quite let go, and just nothing happens. Right? So it's a small percentage, but sometimes it's just the way it is. Right? The next bit is people may get little vague snapshots or images, and they're not sure if it's real or they're making it up. Okay, so it starts off quite vague. The next one really is people get images and sensations and scenes that start off a little bit vague, but they become more clear as the regression progresses. Okay. The fourth one can be quite a detailed experience with clear scenes, images, sensations, as well as an understanding of the feelings and emotions involved, but still detached in some way. So more like a witness as opposed to a participant. Right? And then the fifth one is like a full-on experience with the client feeling very there, seeing, feeling, experiencing it from the first person. And those are usually the most dramatic ones. Right? So they can be amazing things to witness, to watch, but also they can be quite dramatic as well. So these are the typical things there, kind of from 1 when nothing happens to 5, then we have quite a major experience occurring. So the majority of people are usually around the 3 or 4 category, which is where either it starts off a bit vague, then they get going, or they just get going with some kind of images and sensations and information, and it flows reasonably nicely with a bit of encouragement. Right? People who are excellent hypnotic subjects will usually be in the 5 category of good experience. People with a strong amount of fear or resistance will be more likely to be 1 or 2. But as always with people who have a lot of fear and resistance, if you can flip that switch, sometimes they just leap the other way and they become a full-on experience, number 5. My experience has been that people who have fear and resistance are often, they just know they're very good subjects, but so they hold back. Okay, and if they let go, then they become a very, very good hypnotic subject. But most people, we round about the 3 or 4 thing. Just go back to those numbers. 3 starts off vague and becomes more clear, or just a pretty detailed experience with clear scenes and images. All right, so that's typically what you can expect to happen. Some final thoughts. Quite often people they say, oh, I feel like I'm making this up. Right? Many people would say that, first of all, because the information will be coming from somewhere other than their normal memory. There's 2 spelling mistakes there, fro and there. I need to correct that in a moment. From somewhere other than their normal memory. All right? So just encourage them to stay with it and just see what happens. Okay, I normally say, yeah, it's okay. It's coming from somewhere else within you, so it may feel like you're making it up. But it's okay, stay with it, just see what happens. And as you do that, usually it will lead into a more full and meaningful experience. All right? What we don't want is for them to start analysing at that moment, because that critical faculty will just jump in and we'll start losing the momentum of the experience. So be as reassuring as you can, and things will usually start flowing again after that. Take your time and allow the client time. something you notice when you do a few past life regressions is they can require extra patience, right? As the client's experience of time will often be very, very different than yours. And it may take them quite a while to assimilate details and form answers before they can verbalize. All right? So it can be that the gaps between you asking a question or them speaking can be a lot longer than normal regression, if you're used to doing normal regressions. Right? Not always, because if someone's in a good flow, it'll come quite readily. But quite often, they're so busy, immersed in the experience, they almost forget to speak. Okay, and you have to nudge them now and again. So just be aware of being really patient and taking your time there. Final thoughts on if people have traumatic experiences and have reactions, then just treat them exactly the same as you would a normal regression experience. All right. So use clean language to encourage the person through the process. Try and keep them going if you can, And you can use dissociation if it gets too much. Right, if a person's suddenly getting too distressed, you can say, okay, just back off for a moment. Just instead of being in it, just see it on a screen, watch it on a screen. You can separate, something like that, right? I rarely do that because it's usually better to take someone through and out the other side. But if someone's looking uncomfortable, then you can just pull back a bit and disconnect some of the feelings or disconnect sensations or something like that, all right? If someone's suddenly thinking a lot of pain, for example, you can say, okay, just switch the pain off, just have the images and the sensations that you need to be aware of, but disconnect any pain. It's never happened to me, but I'm telling you just in case you're worried about that sort of stuff. Okay. Remember, in that state, the person will believe pretty much anything you tell them within the realms of that experience. So if you can say, you can zoom away, you can change it, you can switch things off, then they'll tend to follow. Okay. And again, you can use kind of analytical techniques such as expressing the unexpressed things, what you're feeling inside. If you could say it again, if you could speak to that part of you, if the you now could speak to you back then, if that you then could speak to you now. So sometimes you can interact that way, but you'll just get an idea if that feels appropriate to do so. All right. To begin with, you're going to be just getting used to the whole process itself. But once you start getting more used to these things, you can just treat them as a normal therapy session and pull in any kind of therapeutic technique if you want to. But I would always aim to try and complete the experience within the session if you can. You don't want to leave someone kind of hanging around in a past life experience and say, right, well, time's up now. You kind of want to round the whole thing off. So you have to keep an eye on the clock if you're on a schedule. So help them move through different meaningful moments, help them get some information, make sure you've got enough time to kind of move through different things and just bring back anything useful, let go of anything that they can let go of to set them free and round the whole thing up so it becomes quite a nice, neat and tidy session. They may still have stuff to deal with from it or stuff to go through again, but you really want to make sure that the whole thing is they've let go of it and are back in the present and fully integrated into the present, shall we say. And I'm pretty sure that's just kind of about it, really, for what I wanted to say. So I've been talking about 40 minutes or so. So let's go through any questions. Let me just turn the slides off for a moment and see if anyone's got any questions. If I can get out of this. Wow. Good. Okay. Hopefully you guys have been chatting while I've been talking. It's good. So, yeah, let's have a look. Put that there a moment. Okay. Oh, Dan. Yeah, good question. How do you find out if someone is a kinesthetic, visual, audio? Just picking up on how they phrase things. Yeah, you can. What you can do that you can either just pick up on how they phrase things, but what I found when I started trying to do that is I spent so long trying to work out what they were, I missed what they were saying. Right? So I'm busy trying to work out what they were, I missed what they were saying. So what I do nowadays, what I've done for years and years, is if it's really obvious, if the words just leap out in a way, if they're using very visual words or using very, very kinesthetic words, if that leaps out, then I'll tailor it more that way. But if it doesn't, every time I do any kind of visualization type thing or any kind of regression or anything, I just use all the different modalities at the same time. And I usually start off with the kinesthetic one. Just notice anything you feel, notice anything you sense, any sounds that might be there, anything you can see. So I'll just be very, very general on that, Dan. That's the way I tend to use that. Okay, I find it much easier to do that rather than trying to be too clever, trying to work out what people are. But if it's obvious, then I'll adapt that. Okay. Oops. Okay, James says, topic fascinates me. My sister told me about how she had done this years ago, and she was in a village. The therapist asked her to walk towards the well, sprang in the square, and look at her reflection. She told me her reflection was of a bearded man wearing a horned hat, and that she was a Viking. It wasn't until later my son told me that Vikings don't actually wear horned hats, so I'm a bit conflicted about this authenticity. Yeah, okay, that's right. Remember, a person's belief system will be affecting it too. As Mary says, it doesn't prove or disprove it. See it fill afterwards. Good, yeah, Mary's got a past life MP3. There's one on the website as well. One in my members area, in your members area. You should have access to that as well. If any of you haven't got access to that, then it means you've not got to that level yet, or we haven't unlocked it for you. So you should be able to get that MP3 there if you want it, or try Mary's as well, which is great. John says, interested about writing it up afterwards. I just found it difficult to make something meaningful after the initial, well, that was weird response. Yeah, okay. Yeah, it depends what happens really. If it's quite neutral, then there's probably not a lot of emotive stuff there. But if it's more feelings and more emotions involved, and it's more like a more full experience, then that gets a bit easier. Okay, so it depends on the level of experience, John. As you know, some people it's quite a light experience. Some people will be much more meaningful. Dan says, cool, excellent. Any not so much inductions, deepness I prefer. Not really. I just, I'm a bit faddy, really. James. It depends which induction I'm into that week or that month. I go through little fads, really. I'd like them to be really, really physically relaxed. So almost if someone's almost on the verge of sleep in a way. If I'm getting close to that, so they almost forget about the whole thing. So the breathing's changing. They're really drifting and daydreaming quite a lot almost. What I don't really want is someone who's quite alert, quite aware, and looking to control the whole thing. Because if you can help someone really relax physically, then they're more likely to relax mentally. And it becomes more of a daydreamy type experience. They're far less likely to be critical of what's occurring. So I tend to use quite a strong physical relaxation one. Last night, I had the evening class last night when I finally stopped laughing and got it to work properly. I did like a physical one, the hands breathing out, your arms breathing out, your body breathing out. I've not really told you guys that one yet. It's something I've not really mentioned too much before. But if you focus on little openings on the tips of your fingers, tips of your toes, and think about kind of tensions just flowing out as if your body's breathing out through your hands and your fingers and breathing out through your feet and your toes. That tends to work really well. It creates a very deep physical relaxation, and then the mind can relax pretty well after that. So that's pretty the usual way I look for that. I hope that makes sense, James. But there's no particular magic one for past life. It's just get into a reasonable state. Yeah, Mary says, some people... Great, you're welcome, James. That's great. Mary says, some people bounce straight into it if they've booked in advance because they've spent a few days getting ready mentally. And Mary's... Oh, Mary, you've been doing it for years, haven't you? That's right, yeah. So, yeah, some people, they're just ready. They want the whole thing, that they're prepared for it, and they'll dive straight into it, as Mary says. Sometimes it can be a little more subtle. And sometimes it happens spontaneously too. I quite like those because the person wasn't expecting it. We weren't talking about it. It's just something suddenly goes on the direction, and we think, "Oh, hang on a minute, where are we now? This is strange." And some of those have been the most profound experiences for me witnessing, and also the person going through it when they happen spontaneously. One comes to mind and quite often mentions the lady who she suddenly, we were talking, childhood stuff, and with this particularly, I remember that she had a big fear that of when she was a child of telling people the gifts she had. She said it was something like, I know what's going to happen. I can read people's thoughts. I feel things, I sense things, but I'm too scared to tell people in case they think I'm strange. And she basically shut all this away from childhood and was telling me about it under hypnosis as a regression. And there's a lot of emotion, a lot of fear, a lot of shame with that, because she'd been ashamed that she was feeling these things. And all her life, in a way, she'd been able to do this, but she never told anybody and was scared of it and felt guilty about the whole process. And we were just going through this, and suddenly, the whole face changed, and the whole demeanor changed. And suddenly, she described kind of being pretty much burnt at the stake as a witch in some time or time period. Never went through it too much detail of that, but I kind of sat there watching her being burnt, and I could see the discomfort coming, and she was describing the flames starting to lick around her feet, around her body. She was starting to describe the sensations of it, and then just as it starts to get too uncomfortable, then she kind of just left the body, and it's hard to convey this, but the look of bliss that comes on someone's face, and I've seen this numerous times now, when someone's having a very, very vivid regression, and there's some kind of end-of-life trauma goes on, that moment where they leave that body within that experience, it's a look of peace on someone's face that it's so unique. I think I've only ever seen it when watching these kind of experiences. And I've seen a lot of people go through from stress to peace and relief, but there's something about that one that it just looks so blissful. And it's a definite change of state of mind. Something happens inside that person at that moment. Whatever's causing it, I don't know, can't confirm that, but something changes quite profound. So this lady, we went through that, and and in a way, as she went through that, all her fears of her gift, in a way, her ability, were being abreacted, and set free in a way. And she wasn't very happy about the whole process because she was still trying to resist it all, but she knew she had to face up to something to move on in life. So that was one that was quite amazing, but not planned in a way, and had a good experience. It was quite dramatic. That there's another thing that came to mind just then, but it's gone right now. But I'm sure it'll come back if it's relevant. Lovely. Okay. Any more questions there, guys? We've been going nearly an hour. Anything else? Do you get the idea? It's just a chat, nice induction, some kind of transitional process that you feel comfortable with, and try a few. You can write a script out if you want to, but I tend to just have an idea in my mind and picture, imagine it, visualize it, and then describe what I'm picturing myself, and then that tends to work quite well. But take the person through it, see what happens. Just be gently encouraging. Ask a few questions if you want to. See where it takes them to, and then just bring them back, have a little chat, and then discuss it, analyze it if you want to. I tell you what was funny. My friend who, the hairy feet guy, his name's Andy actually as well, and he's the drummer in the band I was in. And basically, he was back in ancient Egypt, not as your typical regression. He was just like a poor guy in kind of Egyptian times, just wandering around, a bit of a poor, lonely traveller type person, really, and quite sad at times and lonely at times, but just this kind of very tall teacher type person. And I sort of go to the end of your life there, and what he described was, he said to him, he felt he had curled up in like a fetal position, and he could, and as I said, just come back now. He said he could feel all the sand running through his fingers, running through his toes, and he said, I was just curled up like a baby, and I could feel the sand. And he said, "What did I look like curled up on the bed?" And I said, "Well, you didn't move. You haven't moved a muscle since we started this thing." And he said to me, "No, I was curled up." I said, "No, you weren't. You haven't moved at all." And he was a bit shocked to think that he hadn't actually moved, because as far as he was concerned, he had actually curled up in like the fetal position and was curled up in this little ball in a way. But he said, I can feel the sand running over me. I can feel the sand running over me. And we thought nothing of it and went and did what we did. Then the next week, because we were living in North London at the time, we went down to the British Museum for something to do. And they had the Egyptian exhibition at the time. This is going back, 20 years ago now. And we didn't plan to go there, but we went around it. And we walked up to this little case there, and they had this little skeleton in a fetal position. And we read it, and it said, in ancient Egypt times, the poor people were buried in shallow graves of sand, and their bodies were curled up into the fetal position. And my heart started beating a bit, thinking, oh my goodness, look at that. And I looked at my mate, and he'd gone completely white. He could hardly speak. And he was like, oh, that could be me, looking at this skeleton there, But I didn't know that. He didn't know that. Had learned it somewhere? No idea. But the experience before, then a week later, to suddenly see that was quite shocking and quite, enlightening to both of us in a way. But it was a very, very vivid experience. And then having some information a week later to kind of reinforce that was quite amazing. So whatever your beliefs are, I'd say, experiment with this, have a go with it, and just see what happens, because it can be fascinating and life-changing. Good. I'll shut up there unless there's anything else. Anybody's got any questions? Always happy to answer questions. But anything else anybody wants to know, ask. In the members area, there's at least 2 or 3 full video of me doing past life regressions, I think, and I've got another one. Actually, I've got another 2 to add to that. So if you want to get an idea of how to do it properly, not how to do it not properly, like I did in the Facebook thing last night, do watch those, get some ideas from that, and take it from there. Okay, everybody, anything else, or we can just leave it there for tonight? That's great. Yeah, give it a go, Dan. That's great. James, good to see you again. Mary, everybody else, well done.